Glad you took that mask off.
I know. Well, you know, I got to have it on when I'm out there, but not in here.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's Levy lecture. My name is Wendy Cromash. I am delighted you're here with us, and we are lucky to have Dr. Jeffrey Albaugh here with us today to talk about relationships and intimacy during COVID. If you have attended way back in the first couple years of our Levy lecture series, we had when we were doing in-person lectures, which we hope at some point in the future we'll get back to, but Dr. Albaugh has been to the Levy Senior Center twice to give talks about different aspects of intimacy as people age, and we felt that this would be a very timely topic for him to talk about how relationships have changed and suffered through the pandemic. So, and this applies to all of us, no matter what our age. So let me just say thank you to the Levy Senior Center Foundation for making these lectures possible. Without their support and without your generous support, we would not be able to have these programs available. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Albaugh. He has an impressive list of credentials. I am not going to read all of them, but I will give you the top line summary. He's a board certified advanced practice urology clinical nurse specialist, researcher and director of sexual health at North Shore University Health System in the Chicagoland area. He's a certified sexuality counselor, and in addition to his role at North Shore, he has led the sexual health clinic at the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center in Chicago for over a decade, serving veterans. He has written many publications in peer-reviewed journals, chapters in books on sexual dysfunction, published a booklet, Understanding Erectile Dysfunction, Patient Evaluation and Treatment Options for Healthcare Professionals. He's an internationally recognized speaker, and we have him for a whole hour and a half, so I'm delighted. I am going to mute myself and hide myself from the screen after Dr. Albaugh's presentation. I will come back and field your questions. Dr. Albaugh, welcome back to us. And this is a different format, but we are thrilled that you're here.
Thank you so much. It's always a treat to talk to the group at the Levy Center, and it's always wonderful to work with Wendy. So I really thank you for all your help putting this together and the invitation to come back and talk to you all more, and maybe a little bit different group of you, because now we're virtual and some of you might be able to join us that couldn't other ways. Although I love in person, and that's always fun. I miss seeing your faces face to face because I do really enjoy the energy and interaction with each of you. But I'm happy that we're able to do this, and that maybe some others can join us because you don't have to travel or come in or anything like that. So I'm so pleased that you joined us today. Make no mistake, what we're really going to be talking about today is relationships and intimacy. We will talk a lot about loving relationships, but we'll talk about other significant relationships too. I think there's going to be some good information for everybody in this talk today. I hope so. And that is my hope and prayer, that you get what you came for and that you find out the information that you need to move forward in your quest towards living a wholehearted life and health. So I will be talking some about COVID and how it's impacted these things, but I'm not going to talk exclusively about COVID. maybe we're coming to a bit of an end of all the difficulties with COVID. I don't know. It's difficult to predict or say. Certainly, Wendy was saying earlier, you'll see masks here because I am in clinic. And when I'm not in a room closed off like this, I'm still wearing protective things. And it's still very much COVID population here that we have to deal with those issues. I have seen patients throughout the COVID pandemic, mostly in person because I do physical exams and different things with my patients mostly. And so here and at the VA both, I have seen patients in person. But today we are going to focus on relationships, and we're going to talk about loving relationships. We're going to talk about other relationships. We're going to talk a little bit about intimacy and sex. So yeah, if you've never heard me speak before, then I would say, so I've been called lots of different things. Dr. Albaugh's fine, Jeff is fine, any of that's good. Some people call me Dr. Love because I do deal with sex and intimacy and love, and any of that's okay. I will answer to those names, definitely. And I have definitely heard some interesting things that patients have come up with for what sometimes I am called out there when people are talking about things. So without further ado, let's get started. Quick drink to wet my throat, and I think we're ready. Okay, let's see my slides. Let's see if we can get that to forward. Okay, so with COVID, definitely we had some mental health concerns. I don't know about you all, but I found there were some real struggles with COVID, and I'm sure you found it too. We were isolated from people we love. We were isolated from being able to see our friends and loved ones. And it really had its great challenges for me and for you too, I'm sure. And so what did the research show that we found during that pandemic that happened to our mental health? Well, guess what? Not surprisingly, fear and worry and stress and anxiety creeped in, and all of us were like, wow, what's next? What can happen? You know, what's going to occur? Are we going to, are we going to lose loved ones? Are we going to get sick? You know, anytime you had the slightest little sniffle, you were probably like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Should I get tested for COVID? What should I do? I mean, 2 years of this anxiety, which the World Health Organization said there was fear, there was worry, there was stress, all these things. It really created challenges. And then separation from our loved ones. A lot of my wife's family and my family live in the St. Louis area. And literally, there were many people in our family we did not see for a full year. And this last weekend, I saw my grandnephew, my nephew's son, who is 2 years old, turned 2 years old on St. Patrick's Day. And I saw him for the first time in person. I saw him this past weekend. The child is 2 years old, and I finally got to see him in person. It's crazy, the separation that has occurred. You know, we definitely had difficulty with being separated from our loved ones. We had to follow rules to try and all of us knew we were trying to help each other by not spreading the virus. And honestly, let's face it, in the beginning, no one had dealt with anything quite exactly like it and wasn't sure what to tell us to do. So as we went along, the rules changed, but we started wearing masks, not so much to protect ourselves, but to protect others. Because if we all wear masks, then the virus wasn't being shed when we were talking or coughing or even speaking. And as different things happen, remember, it's not in the air, the virus. But if you're talking and speaking, there's little drops of spit and stuff that can cross over, and certainly it is in that. Also, so we had to follow a lot of rules. We had to clean our hands constantly, which isn't a terrible thing. I'm used to cleaning my hands a lot, but trust me, like you, I clean them so much more because of all this. We had to wear masks. We had to wear gear. We had to be very careful. We had to isolate ourselves from other people. We couldn't go to certain places. Some things were shut down or closed. So boredom and uncertainty caused a deterioration overall in our mental health. Did you feel that during the pandemic? I think everyone I know felt some of that. Anxiety, depression, boredom, uncertainty, all those things. And I'm betting that you felt some of those things too. So when they looked at, well, how did people do during the pandemic and how did some people do better than others, they found that the predictive of an increased risk was definitely if you had social support. If you had some social support, that was really important if you were connected. But if you were more isolated, there was more risk for depression and anxiety. If you had a lower education level, poor finances, less psychological flexibility, ability to roll with things. I had a patient earlier today. I love this. His 94-year-old mother just passed away recently. She had a stroke. It wasn't from COVID. She had a stroke. And he had a bracelet made with one of her sayings. And basically it was roll with it. And so she always would say to him things like that, roll with it. How will you handle things? You have to roll with the punches. You have to roll along with things. And I think that psychological flexibility was very important versus a rigid stance where you're like, it has to be this way. I'm used to it being this way, because so many things could not be that way during COVID, right? I know you experienced that too. So what did they find in some of the studies? Some of those things I mentioned earlier, but also that the average adults were reporting symptoms of anxiety and depression, and that was up from before the pandemic in 2019, where it was about 11% to over 41%. Anxiety and depression, almost half the people were experiencing that in 2021. That was up 30%. Pretty amazing. We had increased loneliness, decreased mental health, and then also sexual dysfunction. Lots of problems during COVID. And all of this can impact relationships and intimacy. We talked about earlier, and here's another study, because I never tell you my opinions or my thoughts on things. What I try to tell you is what the science shows. My PhD is a research PhD. It's in sexual health research. And so I try to tell you what the science shows us. And the science said we were isolated from our loved ones. We didn't get to be around the people we loved. My heart broke for my prostate cancer patients, because as they went into surgery, their loved ones were not able to come into the hospital with them, to even come to the hospital with them. They couldn't have visitors. It was heartbreaking. There was a lockdown with people. And in fact, in North Shore, we had many COVID patients, and at the VA, and people were actually dying from COVID without being able to see and touch their loved ones' hands. I can't think of anything more excruciating or difficult. And I know it was heartbreaking for the healthcare staff, the nurses that I know, the different healthcare providers like myself, but especially those on the front line that had to be there with, with computers and laptops and pads, trying to connect family like we're doing today over technology, because they could not physically be there with them. Heartbreaking, difficult. My wife and I lost a very, very close friend that is right around our age, was very healthy. She got COVID, she got it, she got it last year. And when she got COVID, she went into my hospital, one of the hospitals in our healthcare system. And a month later, she passed away, unfortunately, which was heartbreaking for us and her family. Couples had increased relationship conflict. I found my couples, if they had any conflict, that boy, now that they were locked down together, it was really challenging. They weren't allowed to be around others. They were allowed to be around each other, and they were around each other all the time. Maybe if they were working, they were now working from home. So they were kind of 24/7 around each other. Lots of relationship issues for couples came out of COVID. So anxiety, depression, isolation, relationship issues, lots of mental health problems occurred because of the COVID pandemic. So let's talk a little bit about intimacy and relationships. And that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time really talking about. Whether we're talking about COVID or not, intimacy and relationships is an important topic. And this is really the third time that I've come back to talk about some aspect of that. Each time definitely different, especially this time is different. We're going to focus much more on relationships, even outside of loving relationships. So intimacy, what is intimacy? Intimacy is communication on a deeper level. And it's really on a deep level where both people feel fully seen, heard, and valued by the other person and not judged. Hatfield said it's the process by which two people attempt to move towards complete communication, verbal, nonverbal, communication on all levels. I don't know about you, but who doesn't want to be seen and valued by other people, to feel really understood and valued by others? I want more of that. I don't know about you, but I certainly do. Intimacy can be physical, and that doesn't mean sex necessarily, but it can be physical. It can be, where you're speaking and holding hands, or where you're hugging. It can be emotional, where you feel emotional connection, a deep emotional rooted connection with each other. It could be intellectual, where you feel like your minds kind of match up and understand things in the same way. It can be spiritual, where you feel like your souls connect on a deep, profound level. All of that can be levels of intimacy: physical, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual. So, do we need to be connected with other people? Why do we think this is so important, and why am I talking about it and stepping out of my clinic with my patients and talking to you here? Because we believe it's so important. And why do we think that? If you've ever heard of emotional intelligence, then you've probably heard of someone named Daniel Goleman, who wrote a whole book on emotional intelligence. We all know about intelligence and how we've looked at it in the past, but emotional intelligence is our ability to connect emotionally with other people, to understand and be empathetic towards others. And there was an entire book written about it, but I don't want to focus on that. What I do want to focus on, after that one came a second book called Social Intelligence, where Daniel Goleman took all of the research out there and put it into a book about how you, me, all of us, Wendy, each of you, all of us, including myself, are hardwired for connection to other human beings. It is not optional. When babies are born, if they don't bond to a human being, to some sort of another human being, they can die. It is actually a phenomenon called failure to thrive, and they die because of lack of connection with other human beings. You and I, we are hardwired for connectivity to others, to feel seen, heard, and valued by others. It's not optional. If you ever went to school, you probably learned in one of your schooling things. I know we learned in high school psychology, we learned in college, everywhere I went to learn in education, they talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which basically Maslow came up with these human needs. What do humans have to have? And one of the fundamental needs that Maslow found was love and belonging. So each of us needs to feel love and belonging. And that's not a higher need like self-actualization. That is a basic need of human beings. It's part of the human journey to feel love and to feel belonging. So intimacy is what each of us desperately wants and needs in our lives, but we're scared of it because intimacy means vulnerability. Vulnerability means sometimes not just great emotions like love and connection and creativity, but vulnerability also means scary emotions like anxiety and fear and depression and opening yourself up to others, letting them in to your world. And it can be scary. Vulnerability is not only the path to scary things like anxiety or fear or depression or whatever that might be, but it's also the path to love and intimacy. You can't get to love and intimacy without vulnerability. Lots of research has been done by Brené Brown. She wrote several books. You can see tons of her work out there and find out more about how each of us has to go through, not around, vulnerability to get to love and intimacy and connectedness with others. It's not optional. We all want to feel connected. Now, you don't have to have a loving relationship. There are people who go through their lives without sex and love, and that's perfectly fine. And if you're one of those people, there's nothing wrong with that. But you still need to be connected and have true relationships with others, meaningful relationships, meaning that you feel seen, heard, and valued by those other people and not judged. And if you've had those relationships, you know they're wonderful, and most of us want more. But they can be scary too, because you can be hurt or betrayed when you open yourself up to those things. And I do understand that as well. So do we need connection with others? I would say absolutely. It is not optional. It is needed. And there's lots of researchers, including Brené Brown, Abraham Maslow, Daniel Goleman, lots of people who say it's absolutely essential and a good body of evidence that supports it. So the human connection is absolutely needed for each of us, but it was definitely affected by COVID. We couldn't connect. That eye-to-eye contact, that soul-to-soul contact is difficult to do over technology. So what can we do about it? We talked about how we need it. So what are some of the strategies to improve intimacy? And there's lots of great strategies out there, and here's a couple of them. Put down your electronics and your screens. I can tell you that in couple therapy, when I'm working with couples, one of the major things that they argue about and have conflict over is screens and electronics. We live in a world that is flooded with the use of screens and electronics. You've lived long enough, and I've lived long enough to think, did you ever think that you would see a train full of people when you're riding on the train with these little handheld devices in their hands, and that's what their entire being is focused on? That is the world we live in today. Let's put down those electronics and screens. Our attention, our full attention, and our presence is the greatest gift we can give other people. And we need and want attention and presence from others. So in a romantic relationship in particular, we want to be affectionate. Affection's important. Sometimes affection's important with your friends and your loved ones, like your mother or your sister, your brother, the hugging, the different things, but it's especially important with romantic relationships. So that physicality, that hugging, that physical way of saying you and I, we are linked in a way like no other. And so you touch the small of the back, you hold their hand in a special way, you linger with a kiss in a way that you wouldn't kiss anyone else. So all of those things are important, and a good cuddle is always a good thing too. So don't underrate how nice a good cuddle is in a romantic relationship. Be emotionally available to the person. So be there, present with them, to hear and connect with them. Find something fun or new to do. It increases dopamine, and it increases attraction, and it increases that bond in a loving relationship and in other relationships as well. Okay, so John and Julie Gottman are researchers who've done some incredible work over more than 3 decades with thousands and thousands of couples. And so John Gottman is able to predict with like over an 85% accuracy when couples will stay together or when they will not stay together. So when we're looking at romantic loving relationships and what matters, we think about positive interactions and negative interactions. And these are both important. So positive versus negative interactions. And when we look at that, and they observed couples to see, well, what's important? They said, all right, let's look at a happy couple. And what do you think the positive to negative ratio is for a happy couple of how many positives to negatives or how many negatives to positive? So let's say, like, do you think it's like a 10-to-1 ratio, a 5-to-1 ratio, a 4-to-1 ratio? Think of what you think the number is. Somebody raised their hand, and yes, if you can put that in the chat or whatever. What's your guess? It looks like Rebecca has a guess. So I don't know. I can't see what your guess is, but what I'm going to tell you, Rebecca, is you're probably going to underestimate. Gosh, we have lots of people raising their hands, and thank you for participating. And yes, you can put in the chat. Wendy will kind of watch that. 5-to-1, Rebecca said. Thank you for your response. It's so good to interact with you guys. Thank you so much. So what is it? This is going to blow your mind. Guess what the number is? 20-to-1. In a happy couple, when they observed them and videotaped them, they found that there were 20 positive things for every one negative thing. Is that crazy? But it's true. Pretty wild. Okay, so that's what they found with those couples. Let's see next. Hold on a second. Let's get that out of the way. And let's say, okay, so that's happy couples, 20-to-1. How about healthy, happy couples that are in the middle of a conflict? So they're having a disagreement. What does the ratio go to? It was 20-to-1 when everything was good and loving and good, right? But what did it drop to when they were in conflict or disagreeing? Believe it or not, even in a disagreement, healthy couples had a 5 positive to 1 negative ratio. Pretty wild, huh? What about the couples who actually were in conflict and they were not a healthy couple? In fact, they were a soon-to-divorce couple, according to Gottman. And what was their ratio? Was it like 5 negative to 1 positive? What was the ratio with that one, would you guess in your mind? Well, guess what? It's hard to believe, but that ratio, 2, is almost 1-to-1. So there still was 0.8 positives for 1 negative. Pretty wild, but that's even a soon-to-divorce couple. That just shows the positive of positive interaction and bids in a couple's life. So watching a couple interact when they are not in conflict is the best way to predict their risk for divorce. How many positives to negatives and things like that. So hopefully you found that helpful. And you can find all of this from John Gottman's work. And again, all this is based on science. So what do the Gottmans say about relationships and couple relationships? Okay, so what do they say about it? They actually give us this relationship house. And the house, the foundation of a relationship house is a positive friendship, which I find really interesting because my wife and I, before we dated, we were friends. And Gottman says building that positive, solid friendship with lots of love and shared fondness and admiration and turning towards each other rather than away from each other and having a positive perspective on the relationship is the foundation of your relationship house with your partner. Pretty amazing. So the foundation, which everything is built on, is a friendship. Some people think, oh, it's attraction, it's sex, it's love. And in the beginning, attraction and sex and all that stuff may be a big part of it, but that's not the enduring part of a relationship. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. But the enduring part, love is an action, a verb, and it's choices you make every day. And the enduring love actually has to do with choices you make every day. And these are things like fondness, admiration, turning towards. When your partner walks in the room, what does your face look like? You've heard people talk about when your child walks in the room, what does your face look like? What does your face look like when your partner walks in the room? Does it light up? Does it fall? So all these things are important. That friendship is incredibly important to a relationship. And then the house part, the foundation is the friendship, is managing conflict. Well, why should you have to manage conflict? If you have a loving relationship, isn't everything perfect in your relationship? Oh, it is in mine after 38 years and 36 years of marriage. Sure it is. None of us have that. Conflict is inevitable. You know as well as I do. My wife and I can drive each other crazy, but I can't imagine doing the journey with anybody else on the face of the earth. But I will tell you for sure, there's times where we're like, right? And I'm sure you're like that too. So conflict is inevitable. You are two completely unique, beautiful individuals that have different thoughts, different views, and conflict is inevitable. So you will never stop having conflict, but what you learn to do is navigate and work through your conflict. So your conflict actually makes you stronger in your marriage when you get through it, and seals the bond even further and adds to the positive love bank as well in the friendship. The attic is shared meaning. So we have the foundations to friendship, the conflict, managing conflict, learning how to get through the negativity and get through the challenges of life that come all the time. If you've lived long enough, you, like I know, difficulties will come into your life. I'm almost 60 and I can tell you, I know this is crazy, and I know I'm almost 60 and I just lost my dad right before the pandemic, literally right before it, towards the end of 2019. My mom a few years earlier, but I never really envisioned, I guess I never really believed myself and fooled myself into not envisioning a life without my parents. My parents were married 65 years and they were in my life for a very long time. My mom died around 86 and my dad around 88. And so, I never really envisioned what a life would be like without them. So if you live long enough, challenges will come, difficulties will come. And who bears the brunt of your of the manifestations that come out of that? Your anxiety, your fear, your depression, your difficulties, your partner who lives right next to you and goes through everything with you. So conflict comes. I have 2 grown children, and trust me, I've learned conflict does come. They have their own way of doing things, their own way of believing about things, and they don't want to hear our ways anymore. And conflict comes with friends, with family. If you have a family and they're enmeshed in each other a bit, and you have a relationship that's involved, you have conflict. I'm sure you know about conflict, and it is inevitable. So conflict is inevitable, but learning to manage it is really important. Meaning is such a big deal. Meaning is such a big deal that this amazing human being wrote and studied meaning in an unbelievable way. And he thought it was so important, and his wife believed it was so important, that the research that he started before the Holocaust, he put that information in documents and he sewed them into his coat, hoping that he could save and preserve that incredible information that he had started with his study of the importance of meaning in our lives. And eventually he went on to lose pretty much his entire family in the Holocaust. And he went on to say that man can shoulder any circumstance if he can find meaning into it. And he did lose that coat. He did lose that research. But that incredible human being who taught us so much about the importance of meaning in our life was Viktor Frankl. And if you've never read it, you should read, I highly suggest you should. I shouldn't tell you what to do, but I highly suggest you read Man's Search for Meaning, because I think the work that Viktor Frankl did, and it really affects all of us, and meaning is a huge deal. So creating shared meaning is really important to a marriage and a relationship and a couple. So that's the top or the attic. And so we have the foundation of the friendship, managing conflict and helping and actually using conflict to make our marriage or relationship stronger, and then creating shared meaning. Very, very important. What else? Okay, so we want to build more positive feelings and love. This is vital to all marriages, especially after major changes in the relationship, such as a birth of a child, change in jobs, moving, returning from deployment. I do work at the VA, so I see all these kinds of things as well. So when major things come along, we have to have a lot of positivity, feelings, and love. So we want to build up the bank account of positivity so that when the difficulties of change come along, the withdrawal doesn't bankrupt our love and our relationship. And so Gottman uses that bank account analogy, and I think it's a good one. And hopefully it's understandable to you. And I will take questions at the end if you have questions about that as well. It's extremely important to relate to who your partner is now, not who he or she used to be. One of my couples was just telling me, but when we dated, it was all this way and it was all that way. And it was all, the perfect, and everything was just exactly like it should be. And then now that we're married, a lot of those things changed and a lot of those things are gone. People change. I think we have to look at who the person we're married to now and relate to them and work on things from where we each are now rather than how we used to be. So there's different phases to a lifetime of love. When they did research and looked at love, they found that first stage. I remember we talked about this earlier, that hormone stage, that neurotransmitter stage, falling in love, where you can't think of anything else. And that's not going to be sustainable, because if you can't think of anything else, how do you come into work and take care of patients like I do? Or how do you do your job as an educator or a teacher or a salesperson or a housekeeper or whatever wonderful thing you bring to the world to help the world with? How do you do that when you can't think about anything but love? And that's what the falling in love phase is, with hormones like dopamine and oxytocin and vasopressin and things that make us, crazy in love. That's not sustainable, but it is the beginning phase. But the next phase of love is trust. Are you there for me? Can I count on you? And are you one of my people that I know is there for me, period? And that means, to feel like you're there for me, I think it's really important that we move towards each other rather than move away from each other, and that we move towards we and our rather than I and you. And that's the trust building stage. And that's where I say love is a choice. And then we move into phase 3, where it's actually a commitment, where each day I make choices that speak love. Sometimes I don't make the best choices, but most of the choices I make speak the verb and action of love. So, and when they look at people who are loyal versus people who betray or have affairs or whatever, these masters of relationship say, no one else. And I will tell you, I look at my wife and I think, no one else will do. I can't fathom it with anybody else. Relationship is a safe haven. It's a place where I feel comfortable and safe and can be myself, and I can express myself fully. We're a great team and we're 100% invested. This is what people who have successful and have mastered their relationships say. No one else can take my partner's place. We're there for each other. When I think of the people who are there for me, my partner is there for me. That's commitment. When things don't go well, we give voice to our needs. We don't say, oh, we love each other, so we'll tolerate anything. We talk about, this is what's going on. I'm feeling this. This is what's happening, and I need this from you. We talk about it. We give voice to our needs. We don't withdraw. We don't build resentment. We don't complain. These are what masters of relationships say are the key components to those relationships and success. What else? Lots of good advice for especially loving relationships, but you can use these same techniques even if you're not in a loving relationship. These communication techniques work for your relationship with your child, with your friend, with your parent, with whoever. So, what are some of the things that are so important with communication? And I will tell you, what do you think the number one thing people come in for couple therapy and say, and I say, why are you here? What's the problem? Communication is the number one thing they talk about. You might think it's money, or you might think it's, I don't know what else, but it's communication. It is the number one sided problem. And communication is what's challenging in all relationships. And so these techniques will work for any relationships, whether it's your loving relationship or other relationships. I just want to watch my time a little. And so if you're communicating something really important, now it's really a big deal. Both the sender and the listener both have to be actively engaged in it, and they have to do that in the appropriate time and place. When you first hear the words cancer, for example, in a doctor's office, it may not be the time nor the place for you two to have a really great communication and conversation. Maybe you both need a little breathing space so you can step back from it and then have that great conversation later that evening or the next day. Finding a time and place is really a critical part to communication. You don't want to talk somewhere where you don't have privacy, where I know maybe the people in the next room can hear me, and so I don't feel comfortable talking, or the children are in the room, or a friend is present. Time and place is important. When you communicate, you use I language rather than you did this, you always, you never, expletives, never good. Instead, I feel hurt when, and I feel angry and confused when I can't find my check that I put on my desk and I knew exactly where it was, and you have come behind to clean and straighten my desk, so now I don't know where it is. That's frustrating for me, and I need you to, in terms of my desk, if you could just leave that space so that I know where things are. That is a space that I would like to be in charge of and organize, and I would like you to respect and go along with that. Instead of, I can't believe you took my check. That's unbelievable. I mean, you're so crazy with your cleaning. You're neurotic. Your mom was neurotic too, just like you. And it's just unbelievable that you would do this. You always do this, and you never do what I ask you to do. Okay. And that's how a lot of times it comes out. It may seem like an exaggeration, but I bet you've heard those kind of conversations. And that's not going to go over well versus speaking in I language rather than you language. And you want to soften up your approach. I really appreciate the fact that you help keep order and cleanliness in our house. I find it frustrating though, when I think I know exactly where my things are on my desk and you've come and rearranged that part. And I need you to respect my desk and let me be in charge of that particular space. That's how it can be different. Soften your approach. The softening is, wow, I do truly appreciate that you clean and do things and organize. It's a wonderful thing, but I can't find my $3,000 check and we got a big problem right now, right? Okay, so what about the listener? Their part is just as important. And this is a really big deal. And you've heard about active listening, but how do you really do it? Gottman came up with something even better than active listening. He said, what is the answer to communication? And the word is called attunement. Attune. I love that word. Attune. Attune to your partner. It says so much more than just listen. So attune is an acronym, and the A stands for awareness of our partner's emotions. Being aware of what are the emotions they're feeling. Are they hurt? A lot of times men, we think the emotion is anger, but the real emotion underlying it is hurt. Sometimes when men yell, or even women yell as well, either way, they're actually crying inside. And that is their only way to cry, because it's not considered to be socially acceptable for that person to cry or to let out other emotions like hurt or pain. So you see anger. So awareness of your partner's emotion. Tolerance that there are more than two valid perceptions. that your perception is equally valid to your partner's perception, but they're both valid and they're both real. They're both true. Well, how can that be? Can there be two truths? Okay, let's see if there can be two truths. You and your partner go out to Great America and you go on the Raging Bull, this crazy roller coaster. And one of you is like, this is the greatest thing in the world. I can't wait to go. It is the most exciting thing. And they go on it and they're like, that was one of the most wonderful things in the world. The other person's like, I get sick on roller coasters. I got sick on the Raging Bull when we just went on it. I threw up all over you. I turned green. Why? This is the most horrible thing in the universe. This is what the other partner says. Who's telling the truth? Who's valid? Who's right? There are more than one truths. There are some things that are undeniably true, but often in conflict, there are more than one completely valid truths. And so you need a tolerance, and that's the T, for the other person's truth, and that it's just as valid and that you want to understand it just as desperately as you want yours understood. Turning towards the partner. You'll hear Gottman talk about that over and over. Turning towards. That means when they speak, do you turn towards them literally? Or do you say yes and respond and engage? Or do you turn away or ignore? Or turn up your little speakerphone and listen to your music louder? That's turning away from a bid. So turning towards, even when there's negative, I want to make sure you're paying attention. Your emotions are important. How about your emotions? All right. Hopefully you're still awake with me. Your emotions. Those are kitty cat emotions. Whatever. All right. Turning towards negative emotions. All right. So those negative emotions. So sitting in hurt and pain and anger and fear with your partner. Because remember, they want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And we have to sit with the negative emotions just like the partners. And then most importantly, we have to understand the emotions. Where do they come from? It's not all about you, and you didn't do all this. Pull yourself back from it and realize your partner's emotions and experience are about more than just you. And so try not to feel defensive and like you did something, but try to understand. So then it comes to our N, non-defensive listening. If you're creating your whole argument in your head, guess what? You're missing and you're not understanding and you're not turning towards your partner's negative emotions. There's no way, because while they're talking, you're thinking, I don't do that. I can't believe you think I do that. I've never done that in my life. I don't know what you're talking about. Instead of, this person I love is feeling strong emotions, and I really want to understand because I love this person and I believe in them and I want to understand what they're going through, instead of, what did I do? How did I do it wrong? Okay. So that's the non-defensive listen. And then using empathy, putting yourself in their shoes and using empathy. That's how we attune. Love that word, love that concept, and that's what an active listener does. And I hope it helps you listen better to all the people in your life that you care about and want to feel connected to, not just your loving relationship, but all the people. I've been so blessed to have those kind of people in my life. 2 wonderful, loving parents, wonderful sisters, wonderful best friends since like 4th grade, wonderful friends in my life, wonderful life partner in my wife. And I cherish each of those relationships, and I want to be a good listener and I want to be present with those people. Fighting's normal. We talked about it. Conflict's inevitable. If you're not fighting, you're not engaged, you're not communicating. And I'm talking, if you will disagree, there needs to be room in the relationship for negativity. We all need to practice ways to manage conflict. Okay, so instead of criticizing, no one likes to be criticized. Universally, nobody on the face of the earth wants to be criticized, right? I don't know about you. Do you like to be corrected and criticized? I don't. I don't think people do in general. So instead of criticism, you did this, you are that, you did wrong, you were wrong, it turns into being specific. Not saying you always, you never, but when this particular thing happened, I felt this way. Avoiding global statements about the person or the problem. Trying to be specific about your upset. Defensiveness. Trying to accept responsibility for some part of the problem. I think that's why my wife and I's marriage is so successful, because when we step back from it, we always look at what we did and the mistakes we made. Even if the other person made some really grievous mistakes, ultimately, how did I react? What did I do that was inappropriate? And I always see, and my wife is equally as responsive in seeing her part in it, because I can't correct her. I can't make things right. I can't make her change or make her anything. I can only be the change I want in myself. You can't change any other person on the face of the earth but yourself. But the change you want can come from within you, and that can sometimes change everything. But the change should come from a motivation that you want to be better, not from you want to change others, but from I want to change me and be the love that I want to put, that I want back in the world. I want to be that love. So ignore who's at fault and focus on fixing the problem. We can figure out forever, name, blame, shame, blame, and it's not going to get us anywhere. Let's go to how do we fix the problem? And again, this is from some great research from John and Julie Gottman. All right. Contempt. That's when we really make it personal. It's about a character attack rather than something that you're trying to bring up and give voice to. Find something positive to say, even if it's minimally related, but it should be real. Don't make things up. Force yourself to adopt an open body posture and to be open to the other person, and don't make it a character attack. Don't make it personal. So then you say, well, I won't do anything. I'm not going to say anything because everything I say is wrong. Guess what? That is detrimental to relationships too, and it's called stonewalling. So we talked about criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. Those are the 4 horsemen that the Gottmans say are marriage killers. Take time outs. If you need a break, sometimes you have to take a break and say, you know what? I think we're having a lot of trouble talking about this right now. Let's take a breather and let's come back at 7 o'clock tonight and talk about it more. Set a time and date to come back to it, to return to the conversation, and don't leave it unresolved, but take a breather and a break so you can step back out of the drama. Practice relaxation techniques. Breathe. Practice taking a deep breath and see if that helps you a little bit too. Okay. So what else about communication? I talked about how I've already said attention. Time is the most precious gift you can give others. Agreement. Try to find some area that you do agree on. And this in particular is what women want. So this is what research shows that women want. They want attention. They want your undivided attention and presence. They want agreement, finding some sort of places where you agree on things. Appreciation, gratitude, value your partner, valuing what she does and being grateful for your mate and letting them know that. Appointments. Time is the most precious gift you give. I value you, I love you, and I want to make a date with you. That's what women want. Men want sincerity. Be honest with me. Speak openly and honestly. Simplicity. Keep it simple. My wife is a detail person, so she likes to give a lot of detail. And sometimes I'm like, I need to know what you need or want from me. Simplicity is something that some of us need. And this is what they say men need, but it's not always gender specific. Stability. Listening and don't using emotions. Sometimes when the emotions come in, some men get flooded and triggered and can't really decipher their way through or hear the message. So this is what they say men and women want. This is from After Every Wedding Comes a Marriage. So how do we increase those good neurotransmitters, those hormones and transmitters that help us? And those hormones and those neurotransmitters that we want are oxytocin and dopamine. Hugging can raise dopamine levels and oxytocin level. Gratitude. I can't tell you how much research I've seen over the last years that supports how gratitude changes your mental health, the mental health of those around you, and your relationship. So seeing the positive and being grateful and trying to pull forward the positive is a big deal. Eye contact, sorry, there's a couple typos in here, but eye contact just means eye gazing. Dopamine is raised when we look into each other's eyes. That's why COVID was so detrimental, because we couldn't look in each other's eyes, some of us, and that is detrimental. So prolonged eye gazing, sharing feelings, emotions and feelings, listening to music, cuddling, meditation. Lots of things can help increase dopamine, and that's what the research says may do that. So when we think about sex and intimacy, we want to think about what are our goals? If it's not procreation and creating children, then now it becomes about connection, feeling connected on a physical and emotional level. That's where cuddling can be a real connector. And also pleasure. It's supposed to be fun. What's the point of sex and intimacy if it's not fun? Especially the sex part of it. So you can be intimate in many ways. Intercourse is one way, but it's only one way. Think of it as intercourse is a tango, but then there's the merengue, the cha-cha, other ways of being sexual and intimate. So when things happen, and as men get older, erectile dysfunction happens in a lot of the men. In fact, by the time you're 70, 70% of men have difficulty keeping erections. And most women in their 70s, sometimes in your 60s and postmenopause, have trouble with vaginal dryness and atrophy, causing pain during sex rather than pleasure. And so between the problems on the men and women's side, often intercourse or penetrative sex may not be the best option. So outer course or non-penetrative sex becomes a better option for many people. So it's not that people aren't sexual necessarily as they get older. They may be sexual in different ways, because the only thing you can't do without a hard penis or when pain happens with penetration is intercourse. But there's a lot of things you can do in terms of manual stimulation of each other, oral stimulation, vibration, lots of things that can be done, different dances that cause pleasure and connection, different ways of being sexual with outer course or non-penetrative sex. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Brene Brown, so I'm not going to go into that, vulnerability. So I already touched on that. So in closing, really, because I would like to get to you guys, most importantly, wow, COVID had some really negative effects on our mental health. It caused anxiety, depression, social isolation. We longed for each other. And I think, as Mother Teresa said, if we have no peace, it's because we forget that we belong to each other. And I think that is very true. So connectedness and intimacy with other human beings is essential and important in a loving relationship and other relationships. We can have meaningful, loving relationships with others, but it does take work and it takes some vulnerability and some openness and presence, being fully present on our part. We have to work at our relationships. We can't just think they'll be okay. You can't think that a plant is going to survive without water and nutrients and things that it needs, and a relationship will not survive, or even more importantly, thrive without you putting some things into it to make it thrive. You have to be the change that you want. And I hope that all this information helps. And I look forward to your questions. So in closing, you know, it's interesting. I have couples that have told me, wow, we have had so much great connection and intimacy because of COVID. And I have seen things like all the world happenings. COVID's not the only thing going on. I don't know about you, Wendy, but it's like just when you think it can't get crazier, it gets even crazier. And it's one thing after another that's challenging. We've had all kinds of conflicts in our neighborhoods and in our worlds, and all these things can affect things. But I think more than ever, I don't know about you, but I desperately need to feel seen, heard, and valued and have true, genuine connection with other human beings. And I'm blessed to have that in my life. And my prayer and my hope is that you also have it in your lives as you're moving forward, that you have connection, that you feel seen. And the incredible, beautiful person that you are is seen, heard, and valued by the people that matter around you, and that you live a wholehearted life. So thank you for sharing your time with me today, and I will answer questions if you have some of those. Now, everybody's maybe a little nervous about asking questions, but don't be, because that's what I'm here for. And I have a little bit of time to do that before I go back into my clinic to work with my patients and couples. But thank you for sharing your afternoon with me today. It was my pleasure. And I hope that you gain some information that will help you move forward in a better way.
Thank you, Jeff. That was wonderful. As always, could you take down the presentation so that we can have
Yes.
two of us on the screen?
Perfect. Great idea.
Okay. So I will get to the viewers' questions presently, but I wanted to ask, a lot of us live alone. The majority, a good portion of our audience views our lectures by themselves. And whether that's because they are not in a relationship by choice, whether they've been widowed or divorced, whatever the situation. So how do we interpret what you said and your advice for people who are independent?
It's a great question. It's a great question. And that's where I tried to earlier kind of tell you a lot of the things that I brought up are important to every relationship. So whether you live alone or not, or you're in a loving relationship or not, my hope and prayer is that you have meaningful relationships. And I bet that most of the people there, I want you to stop for a second, each of you, and think about whose face comes into your brain when you think about a deep, meaningful relationship. Someone that has seen you, heard you, or valued you. Think about that for a minute. Close your eyes and think, can you think of someone? Do you have that person in your life? Is it one of your dear friends? A newer friend, an older friend, a lifetime friend, any of those? Is it a family member? Is it a parent? Is it a sibling that you feel like that you have that kind of relationship with? Or maybe you have a broken relationship that you want to work on. So what I wanted to do and what I try to do with my couples and with some of the strategies that I gave you is give you ideas on how to communicate differently. I think in general, communication is challenging, especially if there's conflict. And so how can you build a more solid relationship with the people you love in your life? And so I think taking the tools that we talked about earlier, especially the communication tools, and you can look online and find even more things, but the I language, the respecting that there's more than one valid reality, all those things are really important. Being open to the other, all those things I think are really a big deal. So I think wherever you are in your life, for me, I think if I think outside of my marriage relationship, and I think about one of my closest friends. Now, my parents would probably pop into my head first because I love them dearly, but they're not with me anymore. But my best friend, and so how I can strengthen and be present. Being present is a big deal. Even with my patients, it took me a long time to realize that one of the greatest things that I do in my clinic is to be fully present and acknowledge their journey and where they are. Because everybody wants to feel like their struggles and what they're going through are real. So I would say that
You just muted. Whatever you did.
Okay, is it back now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. That when I lean forward, the button, technology, it's so fun. So hopefully that helps you understand, though, you can use these techniques and the things we talked about, being fully present, communicating in the ways we talked about in any relationship. Old relationships, new relationships. I think about my children who, as your children get over, conflict's really inevitable because they don't want you to tell them what to do and you worry about them and you want to tell them what to do because you don't want them to suffer. And so I've learned to use my communication techniques, and I trust me, I teach it and I mess it up too. So it's difficult because we want to acquiesce to other ways of communicating that aren't so productive. So I think some of those things are really important for all of us to strengthen our relationships with anybody that you love or want to have a good relationship with. Did you find, I would guess some of you during the pandemic, and Wendy, maybe yourself too, I really missed the people I love. And I was with my wife. We were together, but that was the only person I was with. And I missed my friends and my family and face-to-face encounters with those people, meaningful encounters. So I think reconnecting with people is vital and really, really important. Did that answer your question?
I guess. I just, when you were talking about, I mean, I listened, I paid rapt attention, but I'm trying to say this in a diplomatic way, but, hearing about, a spectacularly healthy marriage and solid relationship and 2 kids, and not all of us are lucky enough to have that, for lots of different reasons. And,
for sure. So I guess it comes to, in your place in your life where you are, what are your goals? What are your needs? What are your wants?
I just, let me just interrupt for a
second. Go ahead.
I think that, and I struggle with this, feeling valuable even without a husband, without children. And, how does your life matter if you're not in that kind of relationship? And I think each person has to experience that, that's our own journey. And, and I know plenty of people who are in marriages where they're not happy, or they don't like their kids, or the kids don't like their parents. So, one does not guarantee the other, but I think, the pandemic was hard for all of us, and yet there were bright spots in the pandemic. And I think, the sense of community that we feel through the lectures has been gratifying. Just, building a sense of community, being much more conscious of the work that first responders and healthcare providers are doing.
I think you bring up some really valid points. And I think too, what's so great about this is that even those are some excellent things to say. And that's what vulnerability is saying, here's where I am, and this is where I'm struggling. And what's so great about you saying it is, Wendy in particular, is that there's people on this call who are in similar places and feeling a lot of those things. So I do think that it's kind of figuring out, where am I at? Everybody wants to feel seen, heard, and valued, and like they matter. And I don't think you have to have a marriage or children or any of that to do that. And there's countless people out there who have shown how you can change the world and never have a child, and maybe never have a loving relationship either. But I do think that relationships, not loving relationships in particular, and that's why I wanted to kind of emphasize that a little, and maybe I didn't emphasize it enough, that some connected relationships and meaningful relationships are vitally important. Having those your go-to people in your life I think that is a fundamental thing that every human being needs. And that's what I would hope and want for everybody that's on this call, is to have those good, meaningful relationships. There's nothing sadder than when I'm working with patients, and I always try to get an idea of their support system. So who are your people? Do you have, who are your support people? Who do you turn to when you want to talk? And I'll tell you, sometimes when I say that, there's nothing, they're dumbfounded by it. And then I say, who's that person? Do you have that person or those people? And believe it or not, there's a fair amount of people out there who don't have that person that they would turn to, talk to, feel like they could really turn to, be it a friend, a family member, or whatever. And I think it's really important to have those people in your life. And whether you're in a relationship or not, I think it's really unfair for people in their relationships to think that their significant other will be all those things to them either, because no one can be everything to everybody. We have different people in our life, that we have reciprocal relationships that serve different needs in our lives. So I think it's really important to have meaningful, valuable relationships. And then I think you get to a really good point, Wendy. Meaning. Where does the meaning come from? Where do the things that happen in your day that make you forget about time and that you're so fully present, you don't even know where the time went? That's probably a good place to go with where you find the meaning in your life. And it's difficult, right? Because it gets crushed. Like you, trust me, things happen. You'll have a day full of, like you at the Levy Center, you guys do amazing things, and the lecture series, all the different things you do. And then something goes wrong, or somebody was unhappy with something, and that's the thing you take home and go home with and are upset about, right? It sticks out. When 123 people were like, I loved what you did, it was so helpful. So finding the gratitude and the things to be grateful for in it, I think that's another really important thing. Some of the great philosophies say that happiness is not the destination, it's what you find on your way to meaningful work. And so to me, I think those things are really important for all of us to discover. And a person in a loving relationship is not probably going to give you that kind of deep meaning. And I don't think it's fair to put that on them, and certainly not your children, because the goal is that they move on and they become independent. And then what happens is, well, now if your whole goal was to be a parent and to be everything to your kids, when you create independent, wonderful people, what happens now? So I think all of us have to come to terms with who we are, what we're about, what is our mission statement in life. And I'll tell you, being right at that 60 mark, I think about all those things every day. And is this really what I should be doing with my time, talents, and treasures? If you think, I don't know about you, but I think about that all the time now, because I'm in a position to where I don't have to work in the ways I've had to work in the past. I can make other choices. So if I can do whatever I want with my time, what is it I should be doing with my time? I think those are some big existential questions that probably everybody out there, and I know I'm struggling with regularly. Is it the best use of my time? I've done this. I've done a lot of things. I've worked on all this. Is it time to move to something different, something fresh, something new that brings greater meaning in my life? So I think those are some huge, big questions for everybody out there, including us. And so I think those are things to think about. But to me, I guess the pearls I would like to see people walk away with is the incredible importance of meaning, figuring out what's meaningful to you and how to live a life with intention that points towards that meaning. Presence. In relationships, can you be fully present and not worried about whatever's in the back of your mind or your laundry list or your whatever? Can you be fully present and available to others? And can they be fully present and available to you? And creating those deep-rooted connections that make life more meaningful. That's the parts that I hope people can walk away with, those things, and unpack for themselves. So hopefully, but can we get it all in this hour? Maybe not, but we try.
Okay, let me, we have some good questions here, and thank you for that answer. So if your partner doesn't communicate, how do you go about making changes?
So that is a great question. And it goes back to the thing of you can't change anyone but yourself. So I think that what's most important is you can't change your partner to make them the communicator you want. You might point them towards some helpful resources. So how can you help facilitate communication? I think probably one of the greatest communication skills you can try to use is using questions. Show curiosity and care, but sometimes they can feel like an inquisition. But I think it's important when you're thinking about how do I communicate better with my partner, and especially get them to communicate. Probably the most important technique that I've seen in all my years, and my very first associate's degree was in communication way back when, so I've been studying communication for a long time, is open-ended questions. When you say, how was your day? Good, bad, whatever. What happened today? What was the most important, challenging thing that you dealt with today? Or what was the most important, wonderful thing that happened to you today? Open-ended questions that bring about more than a yes, no, simple one-word answer. So I think that's really important to use that technique with a partner. You might, yeah, go ahead.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I think this person was getting at something, a little bit more specific, that if you're the person with whom you're communicating does not think there is a communication issue, if, say you're in therapy and you think the other person would benefit and that your relationship would benefit if they were talking to someone also, or that you could talk to a counselor together, and they don't want to do that, then, what happens? Yes, you can change yourself. You can't change the other person, but you're in a relationship with a person who is not nurturing and working hard at the relationship the way you are. So,
and you can't do it alone, right? You can't do it by yourself. It takes two people to be in a relationship. It takes two people to have connection. It takes two people to communicate. So you're right on all that. But I guess the things to explore is, first off, sometimes when you try to manage or correct, that doesn't go over so well, right? So maybe saying, maybe you should see a therapist might not be the best approach, but maybe if you can talk about how therapy has helped you and how it can be a helpful thing to some people, possibly. And certainly if they're willing to seek professional help, I think that's huge. But like you said, if they're not, and they don't want to see a counselor for either couple therapy or individual therapy, then you have to decide. There's a couple things you need to determine. According to Christensen, who actually, I use his integrative behavioral couple therapy, he would say, all you can do about your partner is try to understand and love them, and really get to the bottom of where does this come from? Where do these roadblocks and things come from? So trying to understand where that comes from, which could be really difficult with somebody who's not communicating, but you can't change them. You can only change yourself, and you can't force change. You can't even really demand or request change in those ways. So then you have to decide how you feel about it and how you want to move forward. Can you accept it and live within a relationship with someone who doesn't want to work on it, either with professionals by themselves or in couple therapy, doesn't want to work on it with you without a professional, doesn't want to maybe read or get some of the resources out there or tools that you can find very easily to help with communication? Then you have to decide, how do you feel about this relationship, and can you make this relationship work? Because you can't fix it or make it happen yourself. It does take two people to be engaged and involved in that relationship. So I think it's a place that only you can figure out what is next for you in that relationship. But often people are more pliable and and bendable than you might initially think. Maybe two, would that person, could they hear it better from another loved one, like a mutual friend or a family member or something? Would someone else maybe be able to bring forward the suggestion or not? I'm not saying bring someone else into your business, but other people who have experienced the communication, maybe they would be a better person to say, communication's challenging, it's difficult, and there's a lot to learn about it. I've learned a lot by going on this website. What do you think? And offering resources. Sometimes it comes better from someone else rather than you who's in that loving relationship, if someone else has seen the behavior too. But it's challenging and you can't do it alone. You're right.
Okay. Catherine has a question. Let's see. Okay, what recommendations do you have for approaching new potentially sexual relationships in the age of COVID? It's not as though infection is no longer a possibility. And trust are key. And you don't want to be making out with someone with a mask on, so.
Think, Wendy? Gosh, that seems well, some people might like that. You never know. It's kind of different, but I would say no. But what I would say about it is, if you think COVID is over, I can tell you you're wrong, because I just had a patient today who couldn't come see me because his girlfriend tested positive and then he tested positive for COVID. And so we see it every day and it's still happening. Thank God. I hope we're getting to a better place and I hope we stay in a better place. But I think dating and being intimate is really challenging. And I've heard my single patients, I have lots of patients who are not in a relationship, say how challenging it is. And I'll say to them things like, well, how's it going with the erections? And I haven't had a partner because I'm not with anyone, because I've had to isolate and I can't be with anybody. So I think you have to pick and choose carefully how you're moving forward and your comfort level with anyone you're around, including a date or someone like that. But even like, I told you it's been 2 years since I got to meet my grandnephew, but every time I was in that area, it wasn't that I wasn't around, but someone in that family was sick. So I'm not going to go around them if somebody in the family is sick. So you have to look at that. Finally, everybody in that family was well enough that we were able to be together. But it took 2 years. And so I think now what you have to look at is what's going on with people. What is your comfort level with seeing whoever? Your friends, your family, a date. Do you want to see their vaccination card or their whatever? You got to think about and decide some of those things. And vaccinated people get COVID. This patient who couldn't come see me was fully vaccinated and boosted, but they're doing great. They had minimal symptoms, but I can't see them because they had COVID in the office. So you have to kind of decide what are the boundaries and what are the rules that you feel comfortable yourself with dating. And I think it will be different for most people. Yeah, go ahead.
As you're talking and we're having this discussion, I'm thinking, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the big concern was herpes. Mm-hmm. And then it was AIDS. And now we're talking about COVID. And
it's so frustrating. And make no mistake, especially in us older people, we are the ones who STIs, sexually transmitted infections, are highest now amongst older adults, because that a lot of times people think, oh, it's okay now, it's safe now, and you still have to be cautious with all these things. So you have to think about all of it. And wow, Wendy, it's like, oh my God, can you throw any more monkey wrenches into my dating thing when dating's already scary and daunting? So I think it is really challenging in this day and age. And you have to think, of course, you have to think about safe sex and protection and stuff. But like you said, just if you're having a really good conversation and getting to know each other across a meal where you don't have masks on, if somebody has COVID, there's a chance you're going to get COVID. So you have to determine, how will you protect yourself? From my own personal opinion, however you look at it, because to me, none of this is political. It's all scientific. And this is just me. For me, hand me the next vaccine, whatever you need me to do, because I've been vaccinated my whole life. I couldn't possibly work in healthcare or go to college without vaccines. So whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do it because to protect myself. And then when I'm in situations where there's multiple people and stuff, I still am wearing my masks into stores a lot of times, just to be courteous to the people who work there and different things, because it's not mandatory, but it's still suggested. You have to decide for yourself what you feel about those things. And I'm not saying definitively anything's right or wrong, because the science shows we're in a space where you can be around people without masks. But how do you feel in that dating world about it? And I think we're in a better place right now with the COVID rates to be able to do some of that. But is it scary? Oh my gosh, dating is scary. Oh my God, it's a scary thing without all of that, right?
So what do you do if do you have people in your life who refuse to be vaccinated?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Okay, on this presentation, I can't imagine any of you who don't have those people in your life. I definitely have those people in my life. I have one friend who has a really strong immune response to everything. She overreacts to the world, and I get why she didn't get her vaccinations, because even her doctor was like, we probably should put you in the hospital to do your vaccines because you have such an overactive immune system. But I still think honestly, she should do it, but I'm not going to be the one to tell her, because if something happens, I don't want that on me. But I have other people who, just my nephew who did. I have people who have not. And everybody's tolerance level of that is different. It's really, really hard, Wendy. I'm going to be dead honest with you. It's really, really hard, because even my wife's like, I don't want that person in our house. She's very, very pro-vaccines, and she's and the thing is I think it's really, really difficult, because I would like my decisions in my life to come more out of love than out of fear. And I don't want the choices that I make. I think fear is a terrible place to work from, but am I afraid? Yes. But I want to make my choices out of love. And that's why with my family, I have learned to agree to disagree about some things. And as much as I don't understand some of the things about the way they feel about the science and everything, because as a scientist, it's difficult for me to understand how they feel about it. But that they won't listen to science and listen to reason. But at the same time, I think science absolutely can be skewed and people can be misled. I think that's why the vaccination thing is the stuff out there is so ridiculous. The anti-vaccine stuff, when you look at the true science behind it, it doesn't hold up. But science can be spun a lot of different ways. But I think if you look at the science carefully and what it tells you, then it is what it is, and you have to decide from it. So I feel everybody's pain with that, because do I have people in my family who are not vaccinated for no good reasons that I know of? Yes, and I love them and I respect them, and I'm learning to live in the world with them, even though sometimes it scares me a little bit. So I think it's really hard. And then I think, wow, to meet someone you don't know, you don't trust yet because you're dating, that's even more difficult and more scary and daunting. So I would say, I think if you're out there in the dating world and doing it, I think you are incredibly brave, and I admire you, definitely, because I think it's really difficult, but I do think it's possible. And I've had lots of people find love in COVID. Definitely. I have had patients who have through creative ways. And I think it is possible to find relationships if that's what you want. And if you don't, I think it's possible to have wonderful relationships with others despite all of this. And I guess It's really hard to say, but right now, the love for my nephew and some of the people outweighs the other, and so I have been around him, and because I want it to be about love, but it's scary at times, so it's really, really tough.
Yes. Mark asked a question about how can you be fully present in a dating relationship when physical intimacy is so potentially harmful or dangerous? And
so true. But remember, when I'm talking about being fully present, I'm not talking about having sex. I know it's really weird, but you can be fully present with a mask on. Do you think for 2 years I've not been able to be fully present with my patients when they come see me about the most personal things in the universe? Trust me. And
of course, it just, I think all of our communication skills have been tested.
Yes.
God, yes. With our faces covered, our eyes become, having eye contact, nodding to acknowledge that you're listening, it becomes a lot more significant. I even think my hearing sometimes is affected.
I swear, I agree.
So
and you're distracted because you're thinking too about all these things. Like you're thinking, oh my God, did I touch that? I better clean my hands. What did I, this room, when this is a different room than I'm normally in. So part of what I was doing when you were waiting for me, just full disclosure, Wendy, was I came in and cleaned it because I don't know who's been in here. And all these things are in our head that keep us from being fully present. It is incredibly challenging. And so Mark, I think it's really, really difficult. And I commend anybody who can do it. We just got back on Zoom with our small group. We have this small group who met every week for over a decade, and we didn't meet for 2 years. And we just got back on Zoom to do it because we're like, we have to come together some way or another. This is just crazy. We're not there for each other. And it's so hard. But I try to find ways to break through the barrier. I think we have to fight even harder for our relationships, but man, I think you bring up just phenomenal points. And you also, more than anything, you show how this has affected and how it continues to affect each of us in our personal journey and on our relationship journeys. Absolutely. And we're not done dealing with it. So it will continue to affect us in those ways. And I think the psychological ramifications of COVID, I'm going to be dead honest with you, I believe they're going to happen for years to come. Yeah. The suicide, the violence, the depression, I think it will unwrap for decades because I'm seeing a lot of depression, anxiety, suicides are up, just a lot of really difficult things. But sure.
But, to that point, I personally think that the political climate, the fear of what's going on environmentally, and now there's a war in Ukraine, I think those things have contributed mightily to all of us feeling unnerved.
Absolutely. On top of the pandemic, or the pandemic on top of that. Any way you look at it, it's all unnerving. The racial tension, the political tension, the tension on the streets with people, like the road rage and different things. I think all of it. But I guess I would like to end on this note together. And I think you brought it up, Wendy, too. I've never seen more beauty in spring than I did during COVID. My God, the trees. And I know they've done this and I just haven't seen it. So many good things came out of it. I learned to be still. I am a overworker, overdoer, whatever. And I learned to be still and enjoy being present and being fully there with nature, with when I was with others, I can't tell you how grateful. It literally makes tears come to my eyes to think how grateful I am to be with my family again and my friends. When I was able to go to my church again for the first time, I cried. I'm not kidding you. I cried because I was like, wow, this is just such a powerful thing. So I have learned so many important lessons about the value of what we mean to each other. It was really hard. Even this presentation, Wendy and I talked about, I really wanted to do it live. I had all kinds of plans for all kinds of things that I wanted to do because I love the energy and interaction that occurs when we're together. It's an honor to be with you guys at the center there. And so it's challenging. But then, like I said, there's probably people can be here from, California to watch this if they wanted to, which is a whole new wonderful thing that came out of it. So I definitely know there's things to be grateful for, and I try to count those blessings too, because I don't want it to all be bad. But I do think if COVID's taught me anything, it's that the relationships and the people in my life mean everything to me, definitely. And I'm not just talking about my loving relationship, because that wasn't what I was missing during COVID. It's all the relationships in my life that I was not able to connect with. So
I think I share that sentiment, and I think that's important, for all of us. We realize whatever our inner circle, whoever's in our inner circle, we value those people even more. And I think one thing that I've realized through this whole experience is there is suffering everywhere. Mm-hmm. Everyone is going through something, and we may not know what that is, but we just have to be kinder. And
I love that. And I told my wife's like, what do we do? I don't know. It's like, it's so frustrating. It's so upsetting. And how do you do, the only thing I can think of is exactly what you just said. Every day I say to myself, and I'm a spiritual person. So my prayer is, let me bring more kindness and compassion and love into the world. That's my only mission every day. And I think each of us has to do that, because we're all brokenhearted. We're all hurt. And we can use kindness, compassion, and love more than ever. And if we can do what you just said, Wendy, and just be kinder and more loving and compassionate towards others, I can't imagine that we can't get through whatever the next wave of, God knows. I don't even want to ask what. It's too scary to ask. But I agree with you. I agree that that is my mission and my intention now is, every day, can I bring more kindness, more compassion, and more love? I don't know anything else I can do to make it better but that. So that's what I would say.
That's a good place to stop.
Thank you so much.
Jeff, as always, it was great to be in a conversation with you. I hope that the next time you come back, it will be in person. We'll probably also tape because you haven't seen the new room. It's been renovated. We have new audiovisual equipment. So it will be, a different experience, but it was really, really great to learn from you again.
And thank you. And thank you to each and every one of those who came and listened today or listened in the future. There's so much wisdom to be gained from you. And I appreciate your questions and your comments and your thoughts, because I think unfortunately in our culture, we highly underestimate our people as they get older, and the breadth and width of knowledge that they give. As we get older, Wendy, you and I, and as all the people at that center, you have a lot to offer the world. I know that for sure. And
I tell
treat.
everyone who speaks, this is a great audience. They ask great questions. They pay attention. Do not underestimate them.
It's such a treat. And that's why I was like, I wanted to see you in person, because I love seeing you in person. It was so fun to talk to people and hear your thoughts and comments, and to see you interacting with each other. So I look forward to that day again, because I think I learn a lot when I get to see you. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. In 2 weeks, folks, we're having a wonderful speaker. Julia Strauss is coming to talk about the dark money's influence on politics. So a very timely discussion point. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Levy Senior Center Foundation. Have a great couple of weeks, everyone, and we will see you April 12th. Take care.